Hi everyone, I'm Presha, and I'm going to be talking about proportional representation. Thank you so much for Sienna's talk for giving such a nice intro to my talk. But first, let's take a step back and just think about how the seats are actually divided among the states. So we know that the population of the United States is 335 million, and we have 435 congressional districts. So ideally, each each congressman would be representing about 770,000 people. But we also need each state to have a whole number of seats. So let's take Oregon, for example, with a population of 4.23 million. So if we were to go with our 700,000 representation ratio, then that would essentially mean that Oregon needs to have 5.5 seats, but we can't have a 0.5 seat. So how would that work? Should we have 5 seats? Should we have 6 seats? And there's been a lot of discussion about it. A lot of different methods have been proposed, but I'm just going to talk about the method that we're using now, which is called the Huntington-Hill method. It's also known as the equal proportions method. And essentially the idea is that the allocations should be based on the quotient of the representation ratio. So for example, we have two states, state A and state B, with populations 45,000 and 25,000, and they have 7 seats that need to be divided. Then let's imagine we choose to divide it as 5 seats for SIA, for state A, and 2 seats for state B. Then state A is essentially each representative is representing 9,000 people, but in state B, they're representing 12,500 people. So the quotient of these two representation ratios is about 1.39. But let's instead, for example, imagine a scenario in which we decide to have 4 seats for state A and 3 seats for state B. In this case scenario, in state A, each representative is representing about 11,000 people, and in state B, about 8,000 people, which gives our quotient as 1.35. This is now preferred because that means that the representation ratio for the two states is similar. So this is the idea that they're essentially using on a broader scale to decide how the 435 seats should be allocated for every state. So now that we've seen that there has been some use of quite some effort to use proportional, to divide the seats proportionally, but we don't see the same use when we're in elections. So as Vinny discussed and has been discussed in the talks before, the issue is plurality, that you don't need the majority vote, but just the popular vote to win. So the candidate who gets the most votes wins. And this doesn't always accurately reflect the opinions of the voters, which leaves the voters feeling like their voices are not heard. So, for example, in Massachusetts, in the 2024 elections, about 63% of the people voted for Democrats and 36% people voted for Republicans, but all 9 electoral votes went to the Democrats because in neither of the districts is there a concentration of the Republicans that they could have majority there, have the popular vote there, and hence vote someone from the Republican Party there. But this is not fairly representing the views of the people. So the solution, multi-member districts. So the idea behind multi-member districts is essentially that the number of seats that a party is getting would be proportional to the number of votes they got. For example, if there are two parties running A and B, if Party A wins 30% of the votes, then they would get 30% of the seats. And Party B won 70% of the votes, then they would get 70% of the seats. So essentially, there would be multiple individuals representing the same district, which would make it easier for candidates to get elected, because even if they only got 10% of the votes, they can still get 10% of the seats. So, which would make it possible for you to run on a niche platform as a third-party candidate and still get elected. So there are a lot of, and this method is actually used in a lot of democracies around the world. So there are a lot of advantages to this method. there would be fewer blue and red states because they would be more evenly divided across. So each state would have some representatives who are from the Democrat Party or some representatives who are from the Republican Party, and there would be a potential to eliminate the two-party system because it would be possible for people standing from a third party to get elected. So it would be easier for smaller parties to win seats, which would diversify the parties represented. And this would also give more accountability because it's easier for you to get elected or removed because it's easier for other parties to win. Some other advantages are that your vote isn't wasted if your candidate doesn't win the majority, because your vote could still be counted. And there's a less divide between rural and urban voters, because as it's seen that the urban states tend to have a certain party winning, and the rural states tend to have a certain party winning. But because there's going to be a representation of each party in each state, then your state is not going to define what party is winning from your state. And as Yana mentioned, this would limit gerrymandering. And with the lower threshold needed to be elected, there's a more diverse range of people and ideas that would be able to win. So if this all sounds so amazing, why not just switch? Well, why we haven't switched yet, essentially, is because of a couple of problems: intra-party conflict and picking the candidates who are going to be representing the district, because there are multiple individuals essentially getting selected. The powerful parties that are currently in power don't exactly benefit from this system because it's easier for them to lose power, and hence they don't exactly want to make this switch. It hurts incumbents because there's more accountability and it's easier for them to get removed. And there was the Uniform Congressional District Act of 1967, which mandates single member districts, which is why we haven't switched yet. But thank you. Any questions?
Thank you. Great presentation. Do you think there's any possibility for us to start moving towards this kind of multi-candidate in districts election, or is this something you don't think is really going to be possible soon?
That is actually a great question. So 10 states in the United States are actually using multi-member districts in some of their legislature elections. And Arizona, South Dakota, Washington, New Jersey use multi-member districts for all of their elections. And so there is a switch. But yeah, and there are a bunch of, so this idea is coming up. There's a Blue Dog Coalition that's bringing up this idea. So like it's in discussion and it's a larger idea now. Yeah.
I was just going to ask you to work through an example. Actually, you mentioned Massachusetts, right? We have 9 districts, and a third of the voters of Massachusetts are Republican, right? But they have no representation. All 9 districts elect Democratic candidates because the concentration of Republicans is not enough in any of the districts. So let's say you had 3 districts, right? Each electing 3 candidates. What would the outcome be now?
So now, because there'll be 3 districts, so there wouldn't be that much district division. So the outcome would essentially, ideally, be that there's 6 Democrats and 3 Republicans, with like 1 Republican getting elected from each district, which would be proportional to how the votes are being given. So which is what we want.
Yeah, thank you for your talk. It's an amazing talk. I'm just wondering, after a district has selected multi-members, would you think that having multi-members would either make the decision-making process slower or complicate the process? And how, I guess, would the proposal be proposing to fix that problem, if that's a problem at all?
I think more than slower or faster, it's about it would be better because there'd be more opinions, more discussions, more different parties giving different ideas. And since there's more representation of the actual population and the actual votes that the way they've been given, and then there's more accountability, that there's just a better decision-making process that's actually favoring the voters. Okay,